Thank you for joining us. I am Leron Brummel. We continue to look at government's first year in office. Our conversation today is with Prime Minister Mark Phillips. Prime Minister, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, Leron. Thank you for having me on your program. And I welcome this opportunity to reflect on our first year in office and, to communicate to the people of Guyana on some of the challenges and some of our plans for the future.
I usually like to start a conversation with an icebreaker. We never ask really from the human side of it. How are you as a human dealing with all of this? We're in the midst of a pandemic, so it's by no easy feat. This is not just a regular, hey, government's first year in office. It's a conversation where we talk about the COVID pandemic. How have you been coping? How have you coped over the last year dealing with all of this?
Well, quite well, actually. Coming from my background in the military, planning and executing operations, this is just another operation, or several other operations, so to speak, that running, concurrently. Let's put it in a nutshell. So in terms of coping, I'm there, and I'm happy to be in the lead, so to speak.
If you were to describe your government's performance in the last year in a sentence or in a word or a phrase, what would that be?
I think I don't want to beat our own drums, but we've been busy out there planning and executing a number of programs and projects that we had in our manifesto, listed in our manifesto. So basically, on assuming office, the plan was to, without any delay, start the implementation of those manifesto promises. And I think we've done a good job. We continue to do a good job. As you note, unlike other government before, our ministers are all over the country, meeting with the people, listening to the people, planning and implementing and delivering on those promises that we made in our manifesto. And that is our intention for the next 4 years that we're going to be in office.
That's interesting. You came into government. Let's start with what the world is grappling with, the pandemic. You are the head of the National COVID-19 Task Force. Are you satisfied with the work that the task force has done over the past year in keeping Guyana and our borders and its citizens safe?
The task force has done a lot of work. I respect the efforts of all the agencies represented on the task force and the work we have done to date. And frankly speaking, without a task force and a task force performing like this one, Guyana would have been in a worse state than it is in right now. Unfortunately, we had deaths like many other countries from COVID-19, but I'm convinced that with the interagency and multi-sector approach to work of this task force, we've been able to keep things in check, so to speak. Yes, there will be COVID-19. It will spread. It will affect people in different communities, but due to the measures that we were able to put in place and to enforce, that has helped to, reduce, not to stop, but to reduce the spread of COVID-19 in our country. So I must take this opportunity to commend all the members, all the agencies that are represented on the task force that I lead. And we have done a lot of work from August the 2nd last year to date, and we will continue to be focused on enforcing those measures to more or less, reduce the spread of COVID-19 in Guyana. At this stage, you're aware that we have a vaccination exercise, and the reality of COVID-19 as of today is the more people come forward and take the vaccine, is the less people will be severely affected by this COVID-19 pandemic. We have a situation where over 50%, or just about 50% of the Guyanese population have received at least the first dose of the vaccine. And I would like to use this opportunity not to only praise our efforts, but to praise those Guyanese who came forward and took the vaccine, and to appeal to the others who are still to come, still to take the vaccine. Come now and take the vaccine, because the more people take the vaccine, is the closer we will get to what is referred to as herd immunity, and therefore the country will be in a better position to free up some of the activities that people wants to get back into, back into normal life. So the more people come forward and take the vaccine, is the closer we're going to get to herd immunity and get back into normal life. If you look on the television, you see other countries that have achieved a high percentage of the population taking the vaccine and start opening up and relaxing measures. We would like to relax measures in Guyana, but we can only do so with more and more people coming forward and taking the vaccine.
Taking the vaccine. It's interesting that so much is happening within that. The COVID hospital being constructed. I had a chat with Minister of Health, Dr. Frank Anthony, and he spoke extensively about what was done, outside of your remit here at this part as head of the task force, but also in what we were talking about, all of your agencies coming together. You also overlooked the CDC, and apart from the pandemic, we had a flood in May 18 that affected several regions in this country that we had to declare a national state of disaster in those regions. Are you satisfied with the work and the responses from the CDC, of course, which coordinates all of this, and all of the other sectors and also private sector for getting involved?
Well, yes, I'm satisfied with the work, but more so if you ask the people of Guyana who suffered, who were impacted by the floods, they will tell you, and perhaps there's a greater measure to the work of the CDC and the whole disaster relief operation that we've conducted from the time we received reports of the forest region or regions that were affected by flooding. We have again, utilizing an interagency and a multi-sectoral approach, went into every area, every region, every community that were affected by the floods, and delivered relief supplies, medical outreaches to those communities. And basically what I've been hearing is, the people in Guyana are in high praise for what we did. And not only the CDC and other agencies, our ministers of government, they led this operation into all these communities. And if you would have been following the media during the time of the flood, you would have seen ministers all over Guyana in every community dealing with people, bringing relief to people who were affected by the flood. I mean, I was there. I was there in some communities, but it was a commendable effort by all the government agencies, all the ministers, the regional officials, the Neighborhood Democratic Council officials. So it's a case where central, regional, and local government were involved in bringing relief to all the affected areas. And we still continue to do that, even though the waters receded in most communities. There's still some areas that continue to be affected by the impacts of the flood. So we continue to monitor those communities and continue to bring relief supplies and other activities to them.
We talk about that. Let's talk about perhaps the rebuilding of what is going there. An assessment is supposed to come from SEDIMO, but based on the initial recommendations, government says, hey, we're not waiting on the full thing. We've got some recommendations from you. We're going to start to implement. What does that say of your government?
The government continues to be proactive in the sense that you have a disaster, the first thing you do is that you mount a relief operation to deal with the immediate effects of the disaster. As you come out of the immediate negative impact of the disaster, the issue of rebuilding and getting people back into their economic and social activity becomes more important. And that is a stage that we have moved into, and that is called the recovery stage. And during the recovery stage, in addition to, like giving out supplies, like agricultural supplies to get people back into agriculture, there are a lot of mitigatory issues that you have to deal with. You have to rebuild roads, right? You have to rebuild, refurbish infrastructure that was damaged during the flood. You have to do analyses and relocate people from areas that are now deemed floodplains. So in the future, those people who are affected now will not remain in the same area and continue to be affected whenever there are floods in Guyana. So the whole issue of what we call disaster mitigation comes into play now. I can tell you it's a very expensive exercise, but it is an exercise that is necessary. It must be well planned and it must be funded over a long-term period, because whenever we have the next major flood, like the one that we had recently, it means that less people should be affected if we plan and implement our disaster mitigation activities in a sound manner.
Before we got to this flood, when we had our last conversation a few months ago, we were also talking about a national disaster response plan.
Yes.
And an oil spill plan as well. How has that been advanced over the last year?
Well, it has been advanced in the sense that we have a 5-year plan for the development of CDC and the work in disaster management. And we are at the stage now where that plan will be signed off and will be implemented as we move forward over the next 5 years.
Interesting. PM, there's so much we can talk about, but there's so much that you also overlook as Prime Minister. Let's talk telecoms. You oversee that sector of itself. And the first thing that happened, the first major thing that happened was the freeing up or the liberalization of the sector. What has happened since then?
Well, as you know, liberalization has resulted not only, as we would have envisioned, in a reduction in rates or the cost for data, etc. Liberalization has resulted in greater competition among the operators. Okay, it will result in better service. We have seen evidence of better service because recently you've noted that there's been some expansion, some investment by some of the operators with the whole aim of taking the services to different parts of Guyana. The fact that we live in an IT age in Guyana where we have what is referred to as the digital divide, this liberalization of the telecommunications sector will, through competition, result in a reduction in that digital divide, in the sense that we envision that from expansion by the operators into different parts of Guyana, including the hinterland, the service, as you know right now, when you leave the coast, the service gets, yeah, break up or spotty, as you said, you know. But it will reach to a point over the next 5 years through competition and through investment and expansion of the infrastructure. We will reach to a point where the service that the ICT service or connectivity that you enjoy on the coast will be the same as you get into the hinterland. So that is the major benefit of a liberalized telecommunication sector. A game changer also is what we call number portability, in the sense that, you know, in a highly competitive telecommunication sector, you can change service from one operator to another operator and still retain your number. And these are some of the initiatives that we're working through the Public Utilities Commission with the operators to ensure Guyanese benefit from. So in a matter of a couple of years, Guyanese will benefit from the same service, or perhaps even better service, ICT connectivity and better service than in many countries nearby.
Yeah, there's a lot happening there, and then of course the investment coming in from persons out there. When we spoke, there were a number of local investors, a number of local businesses that wanted to get involved. I think the number you gave me around that time was about 30 who had applied, and it was made easier for them to get involved in the telecom sectors. Have those numbers increased in terms of interest from locals as well as foreign investors in the sector?
Well, we continue to receive more interest from local investors, as we call them, the small investors who go the extra mile to ensure services delivered in different communities. And as you mentioned, we did make it easier for them to get into business. That is going well. We have the interest by foreign investors, and that is going through the normal investment process. But in addition to that, you have, as you noted recently, even those big operators now, they have already indicated their intention to invest in the expansion of the existing infrastructure in Guyana.
So that's moving by itself. PM, we've talked about telecoms, we've talked about COVID, we've talked about you being part of the national response agency and overlooking that as well. But also key to that is a question that always comes up in every discussion every year. Reliable electricity, reliable supply of power. And of course, you know, as soon there's a blackout, we get that call, oh, GPL this, GPL that. You're overlooking that. You visited some of the sites where they're putting in infrastructure as well. What's the update on that end in terms of what has been done so far?
In terms of update, GPL continue to face the challenges in that sector, in the energy sector. We have a transmission and distribution system that is being repaired. We have plans towards investing in a new and more improved transmission and distribution system in the medium to long term. But the reality in the short term, we have to repair and keep serviceable what we have. And as you know, we have 46.5 megawatt plant at Guyana-Vden, and that should come on stream before the end of this year. And that itself will help in us attaining a more reliable supply of electricity. But what is important for us in Guyana is what I will call the game changer, and that is the project, the natural gas to shore project that we intend to have up and running by the end of 2024, and that will not only result in adequate and reliable electricity for the people of Guyana, but it will also result in a reduction in the cost of electricity, and by all indicators, by 50% reduction in the cost of electricity. So in the short term, we'll continue to work towards improving the delivery of electricity to the people of Guyana through GPL, but in the medium term, we have a project that will lead to adequate, reliable electricity and a reduction in the cost of electricity to Guyana. And as you know from our manifesto, our strategic outlook is to provide 400 megawatts of electricity from solar, natural gas, hydro, fossil fuel, and wind by the end of 2025. And where I stand now, after 1 year, we are on track to deliver that to the people of Guyana.
There's a lot happening there in that sector. Talking about but renewable energy, natural gas, it's going to take some time, especially in the field of that gas to show project that you spoke about. But in the meantime, you talk about solar. There's a lot happening out in the outer regions, giving power to communities as well that haven't had a stable supply as well.
Exactly. Between now and the end of 2022, because we've started now, we have several projects that will come on stream. And again, I mentioned started. There are about 10 mini-grid or microgrid projects and several utility grade solar PV farms that will come on stream between now and the end of 2022, and that will help to improve the supply of electricity to the hinterland region. Also, in many communities in the hinterland that are serviced by generators, we've invested over the last year in the recapitalization of those utilities by buying new generators or investing in new components. So already many communities, for example, like Matthews Ridge, Port Kaituma, Mabaruma, Lethem, they've already benefited from improved electricity due to our investment over the last year.
A lot happening there.
And then for the homes, we have 30,000 solar PV system for households. And again, is our intention. We've already started the process in terms of the acquisition of those 30,000 solar PV systems. Those solar PV systems will go towards improving electricity in just about 200 hinterland communities throughout Guyana.
Throughout Guyana. PM, we've spoken about so much in the short time we've been chatting. But when we chatted the first time, you said, oh man, I'm in charge of so many things. You know, we've spoken about the major ones now, but everybody doesn't know exactly what falls, what responsibilities you go with. We've spoken about electricity, the grid in energy, we've spoken about the CDC, we've spoken about COVID. What other areas fall under your umbrella as Prime Minister? And what were some of the major things that you think would stand out in those areas?
The Ghana Energy Agency falls under the energy sector too, and the Prime Minister oversees that agency. And that agency continues to do the work, not only in the area of the development of solar technology and so, but also in the area of fuel importation. You know, they have to go through the whole process of awarding license to investors who want to get in the business of importing fuel. So they continue to do their work, and they're overseen by the Office of the Prime Minister. The telecommunications sector, the Telecommunications Agency, a regulatory body, you know, the PUC is there. The NDMA, National Data Management Authority, is there, and they're doing a lot of work. As you know, we have over 300 ICT sites throughout the length and breadth of Guyana, mainly on the coast, and in the hinterland. We have the VSAT, 91 VSAT sites that they're responsible for maintaining. At present, they're, you know, like reviewing, repairing, and expanding the services provided by those those VSAT sites and those other ICT sites. The Ghana Post Office Corporation falls under the Office of the Prime Minister. The communications sector, of which you are part, falls under the Office of the Prime Minister. But fortunately, I have Minister McCoy, who coordinates everything there. I continue to do my work with the Defense Board. I'm a member of the Ghana Defense Board. And you already mentioned civil defense, where I'm the disaster coordinator and the National COVID-19 Task Force. So all in all, it's kind of keep me busy, but it's quite an interesting handful of appointments and responsibility for Prime Minister.
If you were to point out one of your main challenges since taking office, since becoming Prime Minister, what would you say one of your main challenges would have been? And this is across any sector.
For me, ICT is a big one for me, because it is my intention to deliver. And I'm saying this because whenever I go all over Guyana, especially in the interior, one of the first complaints or point of discussion will always be internet connectivity. So that is a big challenge, and I'm working overtime with the NDMA and with other agencies, because we need to improve ICT connectivity if we are to modernize Guyana. The reality of COVID-19 is that the world has gone digital now. In fact, there's a term, accelerated digitization, because of COVID-19, and we need to improve ICT connectivity throughout Guyana. At what cost? We have to do it, because that is the driver to modernize our society, our country. In addition to that, of course, energy, power, very important. We need to fix that, and as outlined before, we have several projects in the short, medium, and long term to ensure that we fix and have stable electricity, reliable electricity, and electricity at a low cost for the people of Guyana. Oh, and before we finish the interview, I wish to mention that as part of our low carbon development strategy, the Amelia Falls Hydro Project is an important project, and Amelia Falls Hydro Project is now back on the front burner as we progress to the end of our term in office. We have to deliver on Amelia Falls to the people of Guyana.
Back on the front burner means the discussion has started, we've re-engaged.
The discussion has started, and we're moving towards expression of interest and to get the project started. A lot of work was done before, and unfortunately, as you know the history, the project was shelved, but we need to restart that project.
I wish you the best in getting that one back off the ground, PM. And again, you're a man of many hats as the Prime Minister at this stage. Best wishes, congratulations on your first year in office, and best wishes going forward as you lead your different agencies and your sectors into this first term.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bromwell.
We've been chatting with Prime Minister Mark Phillips. Of course, we were reviewing government's first year in office. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Leron Bromwell. Do have a good one, and remember to be safe.